I sent you a lengthy list of questions regarding the governor's executive order to start the process of us joining RGGI. And the response that I received ignored most of the questions. And it really lacked any detailed information that should be available for anybody that's had a thoughtful process to even considering giving input to an executive order like we saw the governor issue. If one of my constituents, if I would have offered one of my constituents the letter that I'd received back from you in answer to my many questions that were legitimate questions regarding RGGI and the impact of that on Pennsylvania, if I would have given that to a constituent, offered that to a constituent, they would have thought that I was totally dodging all of the answers that I should have been giving them, and I believe that constituent would have felt very insulted by receiving a reply such as that, and frankly, if I would have given such a reply, I would have been embarrassed to even put my name on it. So with that said, the RGGI issue that we've been talking about a good bit, and that you've been before my committee on the issue, we had a hearing recently on the issue that we heard of many of the folks that Representative Struzzi referenced that are out there working in some of these facilities that are going to have their livelihoods destroyed by RGGI. One of the major concerns has been the idea of leakage. And for people that aren't in the game, that's a loss of ultimately the energy production in those states as a result of trying to meet the different criteria that have been set, which ultimately means jobs move out of state. Now, Pennsylvania, from 2005 to 18, as was mentioned earlier, we'd cut our carbon emissions by 41% at least. RGGI states reduced their carbon intensity for their electricity production by 13.3% from 05 to 16, whereas Pennsylvania reduced our carbon intensity from electricity generation from 16.7% we reduced it by 16.7% over the same period of time, which meant that we were 25% more effective at reducing the carbon intensity than those RGGI states. In addition, we're the second largest net energy producer, which we're exporting energy, where the RGGI states, who used to actually produce more of their own electricity, are producing less electricity now for what they're consuming and having to rely on other states to import and to provide that for them, Pennsylvania, of course, being one of those. So with the major concern about RGGI being leakage, one of the major concerns, and the jobs that we'll see lost as a result of that, because energy production will guaranteed move to other states like West Virginia and Ohio. Why would the administration even have a thought about joining RGGI when we're reducing our carbon emissions without it, clearly better than RGGI states, and it will ultimately harm our economy in Pennsylvania and harm our consumers in Pennsylvania, at the same time as harming energy development industry, which we've been leading in the nation on? So,
and first, just and would love to talk to you more in one of our quarterlies or whatever about the reaction to the letter and specific concerns there. But in terms of the specifics of that question, one, we are modeling the leakage issue as part of the modeling that we're doing under RGGI. But as I said, we're also seeing build out of other forms of generation in some of these other states. So we are starting to see some of those flows happen. The other thing is in terms of the overall number, and again, I think talking about some of the specific sources of some of that information, I know the numbers we've seen and talked about is a 13% reduction in our carbon emissions from, I think, 2005 levels, and RGGI states achieving a 47% reduction over that same time period with no impact on rates, which as I mentioned earlier, has a lot to do with not just the allowance price, but how you invest those revenues to support energy efficiency, renewable energy, and greenhouse gas abatement within your jurisdiction.
So as we've looked at the RGGI issue and had some of the hearings that we've held in the past on some of these issues, A couple of groups that came before my committee were Penn Environment and the Sierra Club. And during the questioning of those groups, they are for eliminating fossil fuel use altogether. So what types of communications have you had or your department had with those types of groups that want to eliminate all fossil fuel use?
We've talked to environmental groups. I'm not sure the specific environmental groups that may have been in with other staff, so I can't speak to that. But we've also met with, as I said, generators and members of the industry as well. And I think, it's fair to say it's certainly not the governor's position to eliminate fossil fuel use. And one of the things that I think is a feature, not a flaw, of RGGI is doing this incrementally. So going through a process where you're reducing, not it all overnight, but that you're looking at 3% reductions year over year.
So the governor's position is not to eliminate the use of fossil fuels, but is his position to eliminate the use of coal, which RGGI ultimately would do?
The position of the governor's office is to use market forces to address greenhouse gas emissions. And
so if it's a government program, how's it market forces?
By placing a price on the carbon.
Which is a tax,
right.
Like we talked about fees and taxes earlier. This would place a tax on carbon that people don't have to pay right now, which they would have to pay if you were successful in advancing RGGI, which ultimately, to advance that tax and fee, you need the legislature's approval.
This is a cap and invest program that is similar to other programs that we've done under the Air Pollution Control Act, and that's why we're exercising the authority under our regulatory authority. Now, that said, as I said, this is incremental change over time. It is not flipping a switch and turning all of this off.
So is it the governor's position to eliminate the use of coal?
Huh?
Is it the governor's position to eliminate the use of coal?
No.
Yeah.